Hello and welcome to the Women in Motorsports. Joe Samdiego here, along with Daniel Zeri from Racers, the girls behind the helmet. We'll definitely get into our regular program in just a minute. Of course, the big news going on globally is Russia and the invasion attacks in the Ukraine. It started late last night, and already a lot of people on Twitter, all over social media, condemning what's going on right there. And we got some news from Formula One, which of course has the Russian Grand Prix, as well as Russian driver Nikita Mazepin and his sponsorship for Kelly. Right now, the Russian Grand Prix, it's still on the calendar. It has been no announcement as to whether the race will take place or not take place. Formula One has said it is closely monitoring the situation right now. The Russian Grand Prix is not till September, still a long ways to go. However, a lot of drivers have already made comments about it, particularly Sebastian Vettel in this morning's press conference. He said he will not race in Russia for the Russian Grand Prix, saying he will not go there. Even if Formula One intends to go there, he is going to sit out. Max Verstappen, the defending F1 world champion, said, "We shouldn't be racing in a country at war." Very powerful to hear the current defending Formula One world champion says we shouldn't be racing a country at war. Now, Fernando Alonso, who was there, did say it would be up to F1 to make that decision, which of course we know it will be something hard where if Formula One decides we're going to still race there, some drivers that want to not race, but you're in a championship contending position and those valuable points, it could get really hard and really tricky for the drivers in that situation. We're definitely going to be following this story more, not just with Formula One, but of course other motorsport series, in which, with all the activism we've been seeing when it comes to social equality, racial justice, this is just, I think, another topic that we're going to see drivers, several drivers already in Formula One, making their statements, their views heard that we shouldn't be going to Russia or there won't be racing in Russia. And I think we're going to be hearing a lot more from other drivers around the world. Now, of course, back to our regular scheduled program, we'll start off with Extreme E and Michaela Anna Kalinske and Johan Kristoffersen, victorious in the season opening race for Extreme E, the Desert X Prix. However, it was really interesting because in that final race we had a red flag, Tanner Frost over McLaren, big crash, so they had to red flag it, and then they did a staggered restart in which Johan came back, take the win. Leah Sainz, second place. This is her best finish. And then, of course, we saw Christina Gutierrez, third place, her third podium. Of course, she has one win last year. And for Sainz, this is essentially another good step where she has one podium from last year as well. But Michaela Alekalinski, she has 5 podiums, most out of any Extreme E driver. Daniel Rosberg X Racing, they won it all last year. They again are on top of the standings and everything. And of course, with the switch of Michaela now in the team, is this setting the tone for Rosberg X Racing being the favorite?
Hi, Joe. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our show. Um, well, that's a good point. I think Rosberg Extreme Racing is really starting again another very strong season. And I think, of course, last year they won with Johan Kristofferson and Molly Taylor. Molly has now basically they switched teams because even though it was just for one race, she was at the Jenson Button's GBXE team, and Michaela, who was racing for that team last year and scored a lot of podiums, as you said. And let's say that was not the most competitive teams in the championship last year. So I think Michaela really had a strong season, and making the move to the champions, to the team's champions, it definitely paid the dividends for her. I think she had a really strong first weekend. And of course, both her and Christopherson after are really good. Last stint in the final could clinch this victory. And I think this team has found something in the setup of the cars. They really have always great drivers. Of course, last year with Molly Taylor, but also now with Michaela, who was of course at the first weekend, so she kind of had to adapt a little bit to the team, to the to new engineers. Still, they found something, and I think they are the team to beat now. Even though in qualifying, Lewis Hamilton's X44 team is always on top of qualifying, but they cannot. They seem they cannot convert that speed into the races.
Yeah, it seems that speed just at the race is just not there for them. It's just something else where we're seeing Extreme E. It's really interesting. I feel this is really starting to show the differences in the teams. Some people just thought, oh, it's going to be something where they're all in equal crowds, essentially a lottery. But no, we're starting to see trends now in Extreme E. And I think it's really interesting to follow those trends. Now, one team that's trying to set a new trend this year has to be Ganassi Racing. Sarah Price, Kyle, of course, last season, they had one first place finish. That was their best finish in all of Extreme E. Bad luck, crashes, mechanicals, just not a good 2021 season. This year, though, that Hummer EV is looking competitive. Last year, Hamilton Rosberg dominated Extreme E. The only other team to win one race was Andretti Autosport at the Arctic X Prix. Do you believe there's going to be more teams now contending for wins throughout this season?
This is definitely what it's been looking what it looks like after the first round. I think also the yes, Rosberg X Racing has won again, but the gaps were really a lot closer than last year if we think about it. Also, the Veloce team was competitive in qualifying after before Christine GZ's crash. We had McLaren just joining the championship and being right up there on pace before even before their crash. Then we had some the Excite Racing that last year was nowhere near the pace of the front runners. Now they're seeing a lot closer with Tamara Molinaro also making a great debut. So I think it does look like many teams, many more teams than last year certainly will be able to compete for podiums and for victory hopefully.
A lot more victories, a lot more podiums. I think the competition is going to be really close. Now, of course, you mentioned Veloce. We have to mention, as I had mentioned earlier, Tanner Faust in that big crash for McLaren. And then two drivers were injured throughout the weekend. Kevin Hansen injured during the driver switch. He was eventually released and headed home. Christine GZ, a scary crash, broke her left foot. And this got a lot of people's attention because looking at the video, it seems to be a common crash where the vehicle does tumble over, go upside down, just part of off-road racing. But do you believe Extreme E may want to revisit some of the safety features of the race format or the vehicles after two drivers were essentially injured during the event?
Well, that's also something that they should definitely look into. I think well last year we did see some rollover crashes, but not like nobody was injured. Luckily, unfortunately, it happened to Christine GZ this time in Saudi. I think it's a little bit more down to the track, to the course. This course was quite quick, but still the sand, and it had also rained during the first day, so the terrain was kind of unstable and it was changing quickly. So I think it was more down to the terrain and the course rather than the car themselves. But that said, of course, you never want anyone getting injured, and of course, as you mentioned, also Hansen. I think if there is something that can be improved, they definitely have to look into it and investigate. But we will have to see if it's something that carries on to the next round.
Yeah, we'll definitely see what happens in the next round. Of course, that's going to be some time from now. When it came to the crash, they were definitely much higher speed, and the rain we've noticed a lot less dust compared to last year. Of course, by the time Tanner Frost crash occurred, was a lot more dusty then, and then just blindly hit the back end of the other vehicle. It's gonna be really interesting to see. I think the second season with Extreme E, as the teams develop that vehicle more and more and push the limits more, if we're gonna see what Extreme E does and how they do with the vehicle. It just sort of reminds me of how, like with NASCAR, when there is a big crash, it goes to R&D center. They look at it, they evaluate, make some changes. Really curious to see how Extreme E is gonna respond as the vehicles get faster and faster. It's just gonna be a really fun season, I think, for Extreme E. And of course, you're recovering this past weekend. It was essentially former regionals, and they're really exciting weekend as well. They had.
Oh yes, definitely. We had the final round of the Formula Regional Asian Championship in Abu Dhabi at Yas Marina circuit last weekend, and we had three women on track as we followed all their season. It was a five event calendar for Formula Regional Asian Championship, which was previously known as the Formula 3 Asia. We had also obviously the two local young women, the Al Kubaizi sisters, both Amna and Hamda. Hamda has been racing in the first, has completed her first season ever in Formula 3 racing, while Amna was coming back after the same championship last year. And Hamda had a pretty strong weekend again. She's always fighting in the midfield, and we have to remind our viewers that this lineup, this grid, was really competitive. All of these drivers will likely go on to race in either the FIA Formula 3 Championship or in the Formula Regional European Championships. So two of the most competitive feeder series on the F1 ladder that we've seen last year, for example. So I think it's really something. It's kind of a big deal for Hamda to be competing in the midfield, her very first season in Formula 3. For Hamda, for Amna, sorry, her sister, it was a little bit more of a difficult season after the race accident in the first race. Well, in the first round, she did score some points with a 10th place at the first round, but then she had a big crash, and the team had to rebuild the whole car, the whole chassis. So that's never really something that you want to see, because of course the car is never the same as the one that you've set up previously. So she struggled a little bit during the rest of the races, but she was one of the biggest movers every race. She was really making some good overtaking, and she made up some good positions throughout all the championship. For Hamda again, she had a very strong last weekend. But ultimately there were a couple of contacts, and so she really couldn't get back into that point scoring zone where she would probably have liked to be more. But we also had Elena Buller, the Swiss driver that has done the Formula Regional European Championship last year. So she was kind of more used to these cars. And she did very well. She just joined the series in the last two rounds, because before she had done the assessment test for W series in Arizona previous to the last couple of rounds. So she joined the series in Dubai, and then did the final race in Abu Dhabi. And in Abu Dhabi, she was really fast. Straight from free practice, actually, she was P11 in practice. She was P14 in qualifying. So and she really moved up the order again in race after race. And in the final race, she was P12, which was her best result ever in Formula 3 machinery. So that's, I think we've seen a lot of progress from Lena after her debut season in Formula Regional last year in the European Championship. And in the Asian, I think we've seen more and more steps forward in the right direction for Lena. And she will be up against some good competition, because she is among the finalists of the W Series selections that will be underway in Barcelona next week. And we will talk about this later.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about Lena and the W Series in the program. Now, of course, this past weekend, as you mentioned, an exciting weekend here in the United States. A lot of attention at Daytona International Speedway. Of course, while the Daytona 500 was the main headline, plenty of racing throughout the entire speed week. And of course, we encourage everyone to check the link Grid Encore. They have a recap of the Xfinity and the Truck Series, plus the ARCA Series, where we've had Tony Brenniger and Amber Belkan racing in the ARCA Menard Series. Now, of course, Tony qualified outside the top 10, 11th place, but managed to race her way in the top 10, finishing ninth place. She is running full time with Venturini Racing. She was the fastest in practice before qualifying. Lack of drafting experience, and of course, racing the pack. That is just a nature of racing at Daytona and Talladega in the United States. You have these huge packs of 10, 20 cars running just inches apart, bumper to bumper, at over 180 miles per hour. For Tony to come home, bring the vehicle in one piece, top 10 finish, that's a great start as she is racing full time with Venturini Racing. Now for Amber, again, this is going to be one of the first of many races for her. She started 22nd and overall came home in 16th place, completed every lap. The race was 80 laps. Of course, the Daytona International Speedway is 2.5 miles, one of the bigger racetracks that NASCAR and ARCA sees, of course. The only other track bigger is Talladega. And right now, the ARCA series, they're going to have the following weekend off, but overall, good effort for Amber and Tony in the ARCA Menard series. Now, of course, some viewers probably remember Bridget Burgess. She is going to be in ARCA West, which is going to be starting up later on this year. Truck series. We were going to have essentially two female racers there, but unfortunately, Jennifer Jo Cobb did not qualify for the event. 42 teams attempted to make the 36 truck field. Haley Deegan did make it in, starting 26, and overall ran a good solid race, but in lap 100, coming down to the white flag, which indicates the start of the last lap, a bunch of trucks collected on the front stretch in a huge pileup that took out 14 vehicles. She was in the low line of the tri-oval, but the road ahead of her just got blocked with the lights on, the smoke all over, nowhere to go. However, she was able to keep running, make some pit stops, get some damage done, and complete the race in 17th place. After the race, Haley Deegan said she was disappointed to be in the crash. Anytime a racer is in a crash, you gotta be disappointed. However, she is aware with Daytona and Talladega, especially in those closing laps, the chances of being involved in a crash, especially if you're trying to race for the win, picking up positions, is very high. So didn't take it too hard. She just knows that this is just the nature of the super speedways at Daytona and Talladega that her and the Truck Series visit. Now, of course, the Truck Series, they're going to be off this weekend. They are not running. This weekend, we have the Xfinity Series. And, of course, their first race at Daytona, 47 vehicles trying to start, 38 starting spots only. So plenty of drivers went home. And, unfortunately, that included Natalie Decker, her and the 33 Rain Brothers. Toyota unable to get in the field. Tough break for her. She will not be in at Fontana this weekend, where where the Xfinity Series are going to be racing this weekend. So unfortunately, it'll be a little while till we see Natalie Decker back on the track. And of course, as I mentioned, the Truck Series, ARCA Menard Series, they are off for this upcoming weekend as well. But we will be following all those series. And of course, we encourage everyone to subscribe to GRIDnet Network, where every Monday, Ben Schneider, Brandon Crossland, they will recap on all the series such as Xfinity and Trucks throughout the entire 2022 season. And 2022 already is hard to say for Asian Le Mans series. Well, this is shaping up to be something really special.
Yeah, sorry, can you just repeat the last question? I didn't hear.
I'm just saying for Asian Le Mans series coming up, how that's starting to shape up for 2022.
Oh yes, the we had the Asian Le Mans series also supporting the former regional Asian championship in Abu Dhabi. This season was quite a short one actually, because of course the in Asia is still really difficult to race all around the continent. The some countries like Malaysia, Thailand, where the cities was going before the pandemic still are difficult to access. So the championship elected to do a shorter season, over just 2 weekends and 4 races, 2 in Dubai and 2 in Abu Dhabi. And this last weekend we had the 2 races in Abu Dhabi, so the 4 hours of Abu Dhabi for the Asian Le Mans series. And we have to also to remember that the winners of this championship are particularly interesting because they get the entry to the 24 hour of Le Mans. So this is something big for these teams. And we had some important winners in the LMP2 categories, which are basically also the same teams that are doing the European Le Mans series, and also using kind of the Asian Le Mans series to prepare for their European campaign. So we had United Autosports, and Nielsen Racing, and the High Class Racing, all these important teams that are also racing in the prototype categories in Europe. But in the GT class, on the other hand, we had a female driver. We had Stefan Cox. She had also raced in the 24 hour of Dubai for her family-run team, Cox Racing by Solochin. And she was racing together with her father. Her father is quite a well-known Dutch driver from the 80s, Peter Cox, and they did quite well in the Asian in the 24 hour series. They were very fast in Abu Dhabi in where they finished third. And Stefan was one of the first women in the championship to get an overall podium. While in Asia Le Mans series, they had a very rough campaign this year. They had two DNFs in Dubai. The first one for an accident like 7 minutes into the race, and that's never what you want to see in a 4 hour race. Then a technical issue in the second one, and in Abu Dhabi they were a little bit better. They finished P21 in race one and P18 in race two. Still not the championship they wanted, but I think Stefan did a good job. She was quite fast in her stints, made no mistakes, brought the car home, and even though they didn't ultimately have the pace to get into the top 10 in class, it was still good practice and good mileage for Stefan Cox. That last year she did the DTM trophy in GT4 machinery, so we will see if she will be back in a GT4 championship, probably in DTM trophy. We do know that she is now in Barcelona following the Formula One test, because she is also the pit reporter for the Dutch TV. And so yes, we will monitor what Stefan can do in her racing career in later this year.
Very excited to see what she can do. As you mentioned, Barcelona W Series. Continuing to count down to the W Series kickoff on Miami on May 8th. Some of the big news, of course, that came out after our show last week. Jamie Chadwick will be back. Unfortunately, plans to race another series were unable to work out, so she's going to be back defending both her championships in the W Series. We know sponsorship is key to getting into bigger series, getting that funding, whether it's F2, F3, even Indy Lights is quite costly. W Series has created a space where female racers can come in and race, get the attention they need, hopefully get sponsors, backers, and excel their career. I think it has done a great job. Overall, do you believe in motorsports outside of W Series? Do you think we should see something where Formula 3, Formula 2, or Indy Lights has a system where there is an option for a W Series champion to secure opportunity, especially when they don't have the funding available?
That's a great question, and I think one of the biggest ones since the W Series was created. They definitely have to address this issue because, of course, Jamie Chadwick being back in the series for a third year and 2 titles is great for the fans of the championship. Of course, we will see Jamie back on track. She's one of the most competitive female drivers out there at the moment, and no doubt about that. She had a great season last year with Alice Powell. It was really good to see from a fan perspective. But of course, they do have to address this situation, because of course the champion should have the opportunity to move up either the F1 ladder or the IndyCar ladder. As you mentioned, in the lights is definitely a great option for a potential championship winning driver in Formula 3 at Formula 3 level in Europe. So I think, but also that said, it's not just W Series problem. I wrote an article on this 2 days ago, and of course we know that W Series is one of the only championships that has a pretty big prize money for for all the drivers actually, but especially for the winner, $500,000 is quite a big deal for considering all the rest of the championships in Europe. But still, if this is not enough to step up to FIA Formula 3, let alone for Formula 2, which has really a skyrocketing budget over the last couple of years, I think there is something very wrong with the system, and that goes beyond the W Series problem. I think the European Formula racing is way too expensive, and it's not more sustainable. And this is something that the FIA really has to address. They can definitely try to work together with W Series to create a bridge for the leading drivers. I think this is something that we've discussed in the past. They had signed a deal with FIA Formula 3 and Formula 2, but then after a test for Sigurkova and Nerea Martin, nothing has been really done. So I think this is something that also Formula One should work towards. But as I said, it's not just WC's problem. It is a problem for everyone in the European motorsport scene, I believe.
Rightly said. And with the W Series, what they've created, I think, is wonderful because without the W Series, for drivers like Jamie Chadwick, Emma Kimmelinen, Alice Powell, it would be harder for them to even just have a seat in motorsports and be on a level where we're talking about them on such a global scale. Well, I think it's really the challenge, not just for W Series, like you said, but a lot of series is when you have a champion that's supposed to move up, the system is broken where unless they have the funds, like we've seen in uh, cases like Nikita Mazepin, where they could just still elevate up to that next level when you have drivers on talent that are just struggling. I mean, some drivers do catch a lucky break. Callum Ilott, of course, a lot of people believe he should be in F1. He's going to be in IndyCar. But even though he's in IndyCar, he is with a small team budget, team that is much more smaller compared to the Penske's, the Ganassi's. So he's really got his work cut out. I think this is not only in just Europe. We even do see it here in the United States as well. Sometimes you have a driver development program like Joe Gibbs Racing. They'll bring drivers up from the short tracks to the Truck Series, Xfinity Series, but then when it's time for the Cup Series, that's where there's a little bit of a bottleneck. Eric Jones, for example, he couldn't get from the Cup Series, from the Xfinity Series to the Cup Series easily. They put him in a satellite team for a year. Then he got into Joe Gibbs Racing, but then another rookie in the driver development program was coming up, and he was replaced. He's now with another team. So motorsports is always such a hard sport to climb up that ladder. What the W Series has done, I think, is really spectacular, and it is working because we are talking about these female drivers, which, if it wasn't for the W Series, it would be a much smaller scale, and especially fans of particular series talking about those drivers. It just, once we get them out of W Series, how do we ensure there are more steps ahead? And I think that is something, as you mentioned, the FIA, the series need to look at because this is not just a W Series problem. Now, of course, the W Series, they're going to be in Barcelona. The top 8 from last year, they're all going to be there. And then 4 drivers from that Phoenix test are going to be there as well too. I know this has to be exciting because now you're getting some of the new drivers from Phoenix. And they're going to be up there with the top 8 from last year. What can you tell us about the four drivers that are going to be there in Barcelona? What are you going to be watching for in Barcelona?
I think it's really going to be interesting. I will be in Barcelona to follow the test closely. So maybe next week we can do the show from the track. I have to check, but that will be interesting. There will be the top eight. Well, actually top nine, because of course also Irina Sitorkova was confirmed for a seat in 2022. There will be Jamie Chadwick, all the drivers from last year. Plus, we will have seven new drivers that will be. Catherine Bonmure was quite clear about this. It's not automatic that the seven new drivers that have been invited will enter W Series. They impressed in the Arizona test, that was in the Formula 4 car. So they will have to prove them again in the Formula 3 car. So that's not given, So they will have to. It's much more physically demanding. It's a new car. It's a new track. So they will have to impress again in Barcelona to get their entry into the 2022 W Series Championship. But we will know some of the drivers like Lena Buller will have probably less of a challenge because of course she has already raced and driven many times that regional Formula 3 car. She will be there. Unsurprisingly, I would say, because of course she was probably one of the highest profile drivers on the test. Then we will have also Emily De Heus. She was racing in the Formula 4 Spain last year. She won the female trophy. She had also tested before the Formula Regional car, and she impressed in the Formula 4 test in the US. Then we will have an American driver, 17-year-old Chloe Chambers. I think she was the most experienced American driver on that short list. So I think it's definitely a good thing for W Series to bring Chloe over here to Barcelona to test with two rounds in the U.S. soil. It would be really important to have an American driver. We had Sabre Cook last year. We had also Shea Holbrook 3 years ago now. So that would be pretty important to them to have Chloe on the grid. But ultimately we'll all be down to the lap times, and then we will have also a returning driver with Megan Gilks. She was racing in the inaugural season in W Series, then was not in W Series last year. Then probably she will have a chance to come back this year. So that's also really cool. Then we will have Juju Noda. That's an interesting. There was quite a headline in some other websites. Juju Noda is racing. She was 14 when she first came over here to Europe to race. She did 2 years in the Danish Formula 4. She was supposed to do the Formula 4 US last year. Then she mysteriously dropped out after just the free practice in the first round, and she went back to race in the Danish Formula 4. So that's also interestingly, she was not in the assessment test in Arizona, but then she was picked up by the series to do the test in the Formula 3 car here. Then we will have some returning drivers also, because of course as we spoke with Catherine Bonmure after the Arizona test, she told us that of course some of them they were not inside the top 8 last year. They will be allowed to come back, but of course it was all depending on how fast the newcomers were. So we have Belen Garcia, Marta Garcia, and also let me see. We have also a couple of more drivers that right now I do not remember from the past season. Then we will have, of course, all the drivers that finished in the top 8 and top 9 last year. So these are probably the big news from W Series. The 3-day test in Barcelona next week, and I will be there to report from that.
And of course, for sure, we encourage everyone to visit racersbehindthehelmet.com. There you can get a full report on everything going on. As you can see, the W Series announced 7 potential new entries gearing up for the 2022 season. A lot of stories to follow. And of course, you click on the calendar there You get to see all the upcoming races for all the female athletes that race in motorsports each and every week. And of course, that is again racersbehindthehelmet.com. Link in the video description below. And before we go off the air, we do want to again report on the top story which we reported earlier today about Formula One. Some breaking news that did occur while we were on the air. Luke Smith from Autosport reports that F1 teams are set for meeting with Stefano Domenicali on Thursday in Barcelona to discuss the Russian Grand Prix. Of course, we'll be following this story throughout the week and throughout the day. Of course, any breaking news, we will report it on our Twitter, and anything, of course, leading up to Saturday's Grid Pre-race. For everyone that just joined us, if you haven't seen the news, of course, we all know what's going on in the situation between Russia and the Ukraine, where essentially Sebastian Vettel has said he will not race in the Russian Grand Prix. Max Verstappen has said we should not be racing there. Fernando Alonso said, okay, this is something where Formula One has to decide. And according to Adam Cooper from Autosport, tweeted by Luke Smith, F1, essentially F1 teams are going to be meeting and discussing with about the Russian Grand Prix. Now, before we go off the air, any thoughts on the entire situation when it comes to Formula One and the Russian Grand Prix?
Well, I think it's a really, really difficult situation. We do have a precedent, actually, when Bahrain was in turmoil. I think it was 2012 or 11. And Formula One did not go to Bahrain. So I think that would be the most sensible decision, definitely. I also remember being on track in Imola in 2011 for GP2 when some bombardments happened in Libya. And all the media centers, monitors turned to the news. That was kind of surreal. It's always a surreal situation when that happens, and you are instantly drawn out of the sport where you were, formerly focused on, and then you are struck by reality of the world. So I think that's really surreal, but something that the Formula One has to look into, and it would be, of course, the most sensible decision not to go to Russia this year, I think.
Yeah, you bring up a good point about Bahrain during the 2012 or 2011 season, where there was a lot of unstability going on. It started with Egypt that summer, Bahrain, other countries, and Formula One decided we're not going to Bahrain just because of everything going on. It'll be really hard to see Formula One saying we're going to Russia. Of course, September's a long ways away, but with everything going on, I think Formula One, if they are really meeting with the teams on today about the future of the Russian Grand Prix, I think this is a right move, because this is something where I think a lot of folks have been condemning what's going on. It'd be really something for Formula One to say, hey, we got an announcement to make. We're not going for the best interest of our drivers and the sport. For Daniel Zeri at Racers, the Girls Behind the Helmet, I'm Joe Samaniego. Thank you for watching Women in Motorsports. We'll see you next week.
Don't be an anonymous investor. Join the stock market social media platform, public.com. Invest any amount of money and share with friends and new friends. Discover new opportunities, such as new companies and potential business partners, and useful tools for beginners, and share your experience with friends on public.com. Link in the video description gets you $5 for being a Grid Network viewer. Use the referral code GRIDnet for your free $5 to invest. Start investing and networking on public.com.